Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. Today, we are talking about some Inter Miami football. There is no game in almost a week and a half now, but that won't stop us from talking about the Herons. Today, we're going to talk about the things that we've learned about Inter Miami so far in the 2024 season and some of the things that we still haven't learned and some of the things that we still want to know the answers to. Before all of that, as always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How you feeling tonight, man?
I'm great as always. How are you doing, Scotty?
No complaints. Ready to get back into it. It was a fun weekend of international soccer. Watched Brazil almost get a draw against Costa Rica. Saw the USMNT win. So it was a good weekend.
Yeah, I'm glad for international football right now because no Inter Miami for a while has been pretty dull.
Okay, well, let's get into some Inter Miami talk. There's a few house cleaning things that we should probably get into. The first is that we found out today Robbie Robinson had a procedure. Looks like he got surgery on his ankle. And so I don't think we're going to see Robbie Robinson anytime soon. Not a surprise, but what's your initial reaction to this?
Well, at least we know about his whereabouts now. At least we know where he is. Well, he didn't get abducted by aliens, which is great. Still seems to be on planet Earth, but such a shame, man. You tweeted something about how God tests his most resilient warriors. Hopefully, he comes back and gets better. And can't wait to see him play for us again if he ever does. But it doesn't look good, does it?
Yeah, it's a real shame because Robbie is a player with talent, and if he was able to ever put together a consistent run of health, he could have been a real player for this team. And I was holding out hope all offseason that 2024 was going to be the year, and then he got injured in the preseason, and then we just never heard any updates until a couple weeks ago. He just mysteriously disappeared from the injury report. And so I thought, oh, okay, maybe there's a chance he's on his way back. He might be on the verge of rejoining the team for training. And then that never happened. And so here we are. And today he puts this on his, looks like his Instagram account. So no Robbie Robinson, no Robbie Robinson anytime soon. And again, we have no idea what this injury is. All we've heard about Robbie Robinson over the last several months is that this picture, really. So he's not going to be available for us anytime soon. The club hasn't told us anything about what's going on with him. And so I don't know if we're going to see him again this season. And this is certainly going to be the last year he's with Inter Miami just because his contract runs out. And considering his history with the team, I don't think he's going to be back next year. So hopefully it's a minor injury, a minor surgery, and he can come back at some point this year and still contribute some way because we don't have a ton of depth at the winger position. Once you get past Messi and Robert Taylor, we signed Matías Rojas. Leo Alfonso's sort of stepped up and become a piece of the senior team. But beyond that, and especially now without Messi and Matías Rojas, we're a little thin in that position. So it would have been nice to have him, and he definitely would have gotten an opportunity to make a mark if he was healthy.
And he's also one of the OGs, you got to always have that nostalgia about him. But shame what's going on. But hopefully he can get better soon and just get back to playing football because I'm sure he misses it a lot.
Yeah. Okay, let's get forward to the big event that's happening around the world in terms of soccer. The Euros are on in Europe, but that has nothing to do with Inter Miami. So we're talking about the Copa America. Inter Miami has 3 players that are representing their country at the Copa America. All 3, the entire tournament has played match day 1. Match day 2 starts tonight, and Argentina is playing here in the next couple hours. But all 3 of our players got a result this week. Other than Matías Rojas, Lionel Messi opens the tournament with a 2-0 win against Canada. Messi had a few really easy chances, and he missed them. He's saving his goals for Inter Miami, which I do appreciate. He did get an assist that put the game away late, and so Argentina gets a 2-0 victory. Uruguay in Miami played Panama. They got a 3-1 win. Suarez did not play in that game, but Uruguay looked really good in the first half. Not as great in the second half. Panama sort of settled into the game, but still 3 points for Uruguay. And then Paraguay played against Colombia. Thank you. Matias Rojas did get on the field very late. I think he came on in the 91st minute, got about 5 minutes of game time. Did get one shot off, but he was not able to make a significant impact in his limited game time. Paraguay loses that game 2-1. And now, because of that Costa Rica-Brazil result, they drew each other 0-0. Paraguay staring at the bottom of the table and really needs a result against Costa Rica in this next game if they plan on advancing.
Can I be selfish and say that I hope they don't, so that Matias Rojas is back soon for our next game, potentially? We need that depth back, and it'll be really good to have him back even while Messi is away, because we know he can really make a difference in this team.
Yeah. Rojas and Suarez, Uruguay is one of the favorites for the tournament, and obviously Argentina is as well. So Suarez and Messi could be gone for quite some time. But this next 3-game stretch that we have starting this weekend, all on the road, is the only games that these players are definitely going to miss. And I think there's a good chance we get Rojas back for that next game on the 17th. Anything you're looking forward to for them? I know that it was pretty bland opening match day for the Copa America, but anything you're excited about or keeping an eye on in that tournament?
Hey, the US is looking good, so that's always a positive sign. They got through against Bolivia quite easily, which you wouldn't have necessarily expected. I feel it's pretty bad, dude. It's a little too early in the tournament to pick a favorite. I thought Brazil would be really good, but then they absolutely bottled it against Costa Rica, so they didn't look great. Argentina was okay. They weren't amazing, but they got the job done. So I guess it's still early stages, and we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to seeing the game tonight.
Yeah, I think one of the questions I had in this tournament was how are the CONCACAF teams going to stand up to the CONMEBOL teams? And even though they didn't get a ton of results, the U.S. got that win. Costa Rica got a draw. The other two lost. I felt like they were at least competitive in at least portions of the games. Canada against Argentina, who I think is probably the best team in the tournament right now. And then against Panama against Uruguay in that second half. So that makes me happy. I don't know if that has anything to do with Inter Miami, but I do want to see CONCACAF at least be competitive. And there's definitely going to be some big opportunities to prove that over the next couple of weeks. So that's it. Anything else about this tournament? Anything about the Euros you want to mention before we move on?
Nah, man. It was a great game when Netherlands lost against Austria, and I'm really sad about that, if you can't already tell. But hey, it's at least we made it through to the next round, and hopefully we can get someone like England and knock them out in the round of 16. That's what I'm excited for.
Yes. Well, I wish you good luck in that venture. I don't think England is.
Yeah, because I'm going to be putting on my boots and playing for Netherlands myself, right?
Hey, they could use some help in the midfield, man.
Okay,
let's get into our main topic of the day. We're going to talk about 5 things we've learned about this Inter Miami team in 2024 and 5 things we still don't know. Because I think that there's a lot of talking points that we've had over the last 6 months that have answered themselves. And it's important that we go back and look at, some of the things we really complained about and the team answered, some of the things that have presented themselves as new problems that we maybe didn't expect going into the season, and maybe some problems that have carried over and we still haven't figured out exactly how to solve them. You want to start with things we know first or things we don't know?
Yeah, let's start with things we know first, just to get, state the obvious.
Okay, this was a very big talking point for months, and it has completely vanished. But I think it's relevant to come back to and talk about, and that is the preseason tour that we had did not ruin this club's chances of competing in 2024. There was a large and outlandish backlash to this world tour that we went on, and we went down to El Salvador, played the El Salvador national team, threw in an FC Dallas preseason game just for fun, and then the Asia tour where we went to Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong, and then Japan. And of course, we also played one friendly against Nos Old Boys back in at Dry Pink Stadium at the time. 7 games, very long tour, a lot of travel. People were very worried about and concerned about what that might mean for the team's health and physicality, and it didn't seem to affect the team at all. They came out immediately, got a win against Real Salt Lake, blew out Orlando City in Game 3. And it didn't ruin our season, thank God.
Yeah, this was a good shout from you for bringing this back up, because honestly, I didn't even have this on my list. But it was a big deal when we were actually going through the preseason. And honestly, I'll be fair that some of the criticism was warranted, because we didn't need that long of a preseason and that expansive. It did seem like a world tour because we traveled so many places, and I don't even remember the FC Dallas game, I'll be honest. But it was good exposure for Inter Miami as a brand. It was really good exposure for some of our young lads to go out on tour with Sergio Busquets, Lionel Messi, and it was an opportunity for some of the other parts of the world to see Lionel Messi play, even though there was a controversy about that as well. Overall, in hindsight, didn't have any effect on our game performance or our start of the season by any means. I know in the first game we had the first half against Real Salt Lake where we played really well, and then there were conversations about why we played so poorly in the second half. But that I think has just been the trend for Inter Miami, where we've not consistently played well over 90 minutes, and that has nothing to do with the preseason itself. And overall, I'll say it gave us an opportunity to test ourselves against some of the better oppositions that we may not see in the MLS, and it put things in perspective quite quickly. And I was really glad that we had that opportunity. And the team looks quite different from 3-4 months ago when we went on that preseason. We've got a fair few fresh faces, players returning from injury. So overall, I thought it was a positive experience for the team.
Yeah, Gregory went on that tour, DeAndre Yedlin, Jean Mota, all guys that went on that tour and didn't end up being on the team.
I miss Gregory.
Yeah, well, no Matthias Rojas, no Cello Wiegand, no Federico Redondo. All of those guys came after. I don't want to say like it was completely a perfect tour. Of course, there was the controversy in China where Messi didn't play. He definitely pushed himself, I think, a little too hard in Saudi Arabia to make an appearance in that second game against Al Nassr. But more importantly, also we lost Facu Farias and Benjamin Kramaski for significant periods of time. But neither of those, I think, you can chalk to the length or largesse of the preseason. I think it was just bad luck and a bad tackle by an El Salvador player, and I think
that could have happened in any other game as well.
Exactly, and it happened. Both of those happened in the very first game, so hard to pin the blame on the travel or the number of preseason games. Okay, things that we still don't know. Number 1 to do first. Can this team be consistent defensively? We started off really hot to start the season. 2 shutouts in our first 3 games. Drake Callender was having a phenomenal start to the season, and then it got really bad. Gave up 3 goals to Montreal at home, 4 goals at the Red Bulls, and then it got even worse. 5 goals over 2 games to Monterrey. 2 goals to Colorado Rapids, right? Not pretty. But the team did seemingly settle in and get into a rhythm that we should feel comfortable with. And they got a lot better up until about 2 weeks ago when we played Atlanta and St. Louis, and then we went right back to giving up 3 goals a game. Can this team be consistent defensively in a way that allows us to achieve our goals?
In the current setup, I don't think so. We don't have the personnel to play the kind of football that we really want to play. And I think a lot of our defensive errors that exist have to do a lot with the midfield and the players in front of the defense, as much as it has to do with the players in that back 4. When Franco Negri was in, when we had Nico Freire and Thomas Avilés and then Wiegand, that back 4 looked really, really stout and resilient. They were building chemistry. But now with Nico Freire out, we've got Christoph in, who's really good, but he has his faults. And our midfield plays so expansively and so upfront that they don't do any favors for our centre backs to try and contain the opposition. So we just end up with a game where we have to outscore the opponent because we know we're going to end up conceding. So long answer short, I don't think we can be defensively consistent until we get a center back who can actually play the style of football that we want to play, and B, we get the midfield combination right, because we're still trying to figure out our best combination defensively and also in the midfield, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I definitely think that a star level center back, which at least I believe is potentially on the table for us this summer, would certainly help. But I think you nailed it on the head. Getting the midfield right is going to be what allows this team to be solid defensively. We went over the crazy Yannick Bright stat in our last podcast, but when you do play deeper and you have a true defensive midfielder on the field, our defense has been outstanding. Nico Frede, when we had a back four of Frede, Aviles, Cello, and Franco Negri, all four players that were consistently more conservative in terms of where they were on the pitch. That was also a period of time where we were significantly better defensively. So I think the consistency between the back four is important. And if we bring in a new center back, that's going to be important to build. But I also think you nailed it with the midfield. And certainly that's something we're going to talk about more. Okay, things we know. Number 2, the 3-5-2 does not work. This is the formation that Tata Martino came into the season after all off season, after getting a real opportunity to get a look at all these players last season. He went through the off season, built the team around in a lot of ways, thinking that we were going to play the 3-5-2 to maximize the skill set of who we had on this team. Brought in Julian Gressel, thinking he'd be the right wing back. Thought Jordi Alba could just seamlessly play higher up the pitch as a left wing back, that we had 3 defenders that we feel good about, and that we could not play with a left winger and just play with the front 2 of Suarez and Messi. After a really bad preseason, which was really bad, we also saw in 5 games this season, the 3-5-2 does not work. 1 win out of 5, 8 goals for, 13 goals against. It was a disaster. And every time we opened the team sheet and we saw the 3-5-2 in the pregame shows, we would look at each other and say, confidence level drops significantly.
Yeah, I didn't even want to discuss those games where we had a 3-5-2 because it was awful. Can I just state something that you've already mentioned, but want to restate it? The preseason was bad. And when we say bad, that's actually one takeaway that we should take from that.
We played bad, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We played horrible. I'm glad we moved on from that, though. But let's be honest. In this current iteration, with the best players that we have on the field, with Messi in the team, with Suarez in the team, this 3-5-2 does not work, will not work, and it just leaves us so vulnerable and exposed in areas that we obviously lack. It's just exposing our issues even further, and that just leaves this team to do all the effort in the second half because we just absolutely crumble in the first half. You've already mentioned, like, the record as a 3-5-2 has been horrible, and I guess the best that we've looked in a 3-5-2 was the last game against Columbus Crew, which is such an irony because we beat the best team. I
don't count that as a 3-5-2 at all.
Yeah, I guess, because that was 5 at the back with Sergio Busquets in the middle of the center back.
And it was only 2 midfielders too. It was more of a, I think that was an entirely different formation, honestly.
I agree with you. And that's a good point to raise as well, because it's not the fact that this team cannot play in different formations and this team is not tactically flexible, but it's just the 3-5-2 in Tata's setup does not work for this personnel. So that's actually a really good point that you put forward. And I would say that 3-5-2 would work better if we had a more narrow approach to it, but we play too expansive in that 3-5-2 and it just doesn't work. We push up our fullbacks way high up and then our front 2 just don't press. So it's like defending with literally 2 less players in the pitch.
Yeah. And, the other thing is it was really easy to defend and really easy to game plan against. When you have a front 2, you're not creating enough width going forward. I know you expect Jordi Alba to bomb forward, and I know you expect Julian Gressel to bomb forward, but you were never forcing the defense to defend the width of the pitch like you are when you have three players in attack. And so it allowed them to clog the middle of the field and made it very difficult for Messi and Suarez to operate in the ways that we know that they can. And then, like you said, the way that we were playing that 3-5-2, our center backs would play very wide, and we left huge gaps between our center backs that opposing teams could hit in transition very easily. And I don't know why Tata Martino ever thought that would work, but without us having a defensive-minded midfield and without us having incredibly talented center backs, which we never have had, there was just no way this was going to work. It was harder to score goals and it was easier to give up goals. It was just a bad formation. And I'm glad that Tata Martino has scrapped it because it never worked. And
here's my question, though.
Go ahead.
Do you think Tata Martino's actually scrapped it? Like, do you think he's come to the realization that this formation is just not for this team? Or do you think somewhere in the heart, in his own mind, there will be a time where he brings out the 3-5-2 again because he thinks that this team is actually better in that formation? Because I don't trust Tata with this, man. I have a really bad, traumatic idea of him bringing this 3-5-2 back against a big opposition like Cincinnati in the playoffs, and we absolutely tanked that game. That's my opinion of Tata.
Well, listen, the last time we saw it was in that second leg against Monterrey, and guess what? We bombed it in an important must-win game. I don't think it's going to happen. I think there's the evidence of how unsuccessful it is so overwhelming that I don't think even Tata Martino will go back for it. And I also think we have to have a right back in order to play the 4-3-3, and we haven't had a right back other than Cello. And I think the fact that he's gone with Cello basically every single game up until he got Ian Frey back signals that he's like, I know I have to push Cello because we have to go with this 4 in the back formation that's going to help us be a little bit more stable, not just in the back, but through up and down the pitch. Okay. We hinted at it earlier, but another thing we still don't know, what is our best midfield trio, and are we going to get there where we have our best midfield trio on the field at the same time?
I know what our best midfield trio is. You potentially know what our best midfield trio is. The question is, does Tata know what our best midfield trio is? For me, it's clear. We need a number 6, an out-and-out destroyer. We need a number 8 and a number 10, right? We have a 6, maybe, in Yannick Wright, who I think has to be on that pitch for that combination. We have a number 8 or a number 10 in Sergio Busquets. And then we have another number 8 in Diego Gomez. Those 3 for me at this point in time, based on the sample size, are the best midfield that we have. My question is, does Tata Martino recognize that? Because I don't think he does. So it becomes like a gamble as to which midfield he's going to throw out and how that midfield is going to look. Because I know for a fact that in the next game, if Redondo's fit, he's going to be in that starting 11. And him next to Sergio Busquets, with maybe Gresso or Kremaski, hasn't looked fantastic thus far this season. So it's a toss-up.
Yeah. I would have thought Tata would have learned last year that he needed Dixon Arroyo to protect the midfield. And so he needed a player like that with Busquets in the lineup game in and game out. And I don't know if they thought Redondo was going to be that when he came, and maybe he will be, and he just needs a little more time to get accustomed to understanding that's his role. But I agree with you. I think they need a more defensive midfielder in the field because A, our back line isn't phenomenal and isn't star-studded, and B, Busquets isn't that guy, and asking him to be that guy is sort of unfair and also takes away from some of his talents that he can use higher up the pitch. So I'm with you. I want to see a more defensive midfield more often than not because A, we have the attackers that don't need us to create offense through the midfield, and B, you can still have one midfielder be that guy, and that can easily be Sergio Busquets. I would like to see a Yannick Bright, Sergio Busquets, Diego Gomez midfield in this upcoming week and a half, but I don't know if we're going to get there. But I also understand why Tata Martino has struggled to put out that lineup that we just mentioned, because it would be simple, but also he's got a lot of players that he spent a lot of money and time and resources on to build into a world-class midfield. that maybe don't fit together, right? They paid a lot of money for Federico Redondo. Sergio Busquets is obviously a huge name, and Julian Gressel they paid a big salary for. So I understand the trouble of this balancing act of trying to make sure that players that you spend a lot of resources on get the opportunity to impact the game, but also balancing that with, okay, but also we have to win games and we have to make sure that we're solid defensively and solid up the middle. And maybe it's better to try and pitch a shutout and let Messi and Suarez and Rojas and Robert Taylor score 2 goals instead of having them score 3 to 4 and winning 4-2. Might be easier to win 2-0. I personally think that's the way to win once we get into the really important games later on this season, Leagues Cup knockout stage, MLS Cup playoffs. But we haven't found it yet. And that three-man midfield we just mentioned has not appeared, even though we've seen, 15 different midfields this season so far.
15 different midfields this season. I will say though, it's also like I wouldn't mind seeing a midfield of Redondo, Cremaschi, and Sergio Busquets, or Redondo, Gomez, and Sergio Busquets. But we need that double pivot. And I would actually have Sergio Busquets play as the 10 or the 8, and then have a double pivot of someone like Redondo and Gomez, because we need that protection and that defensive-minded midfield, because that's the only way to unlock the absolute explosive, expansive, attacking mindset that our front 3 or front 4 have, because they have the ability to play as attacking as they want, create as much as they want, but without having a stout defense or midfield that protects the defense, they tend to concede goals. And one other way to potentially mitigate that is to have that double pivot in. But again, I'm not sure if we have the players to do that, or if Tata Martino even thinks that's a potential way to, go about it. Because I think Cremaschi and Redondo could potentially play a double pivot of sorts. But I guess I don't think we're ever going to find that out.
Yeah, I don't know if I love that. But I also think that this team just needed a true 6.
Or Gressel and Redondo. Or Gressel and Redondo double pivot as well.
Either, honestly. I don't love that either. I just thought when they let Dixon Arroyo go, they had to keep Gregory, and then they let Gregory go, and I thought that was a mistake. And, well, here we are.
Imagine how good this team would have been with Gregory in it. Man, Gregory in this team would have been absolutely destroying it.
I don't think he would have played, man. I still think Tata Martino would have picked Julian Gressel and Diego Gomez and Federico Redondo over them because of how much we invest in them. Anyways, let's move on. Another thing we know about this team is that it's fearless. Come from behind wins at DC United, at Sporting Kansas City, at the New England Revolution versus the New York Red Bulls, at CF Montreal, at Philadelphia. Come from behind draws against Colorado, St. Louis City, at the LA Galaxy, and at Nashville in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And of course, a couple late winners against DC United and at Philadelphia. This team has no fear of going down. They have no fear of going behind. They are fully ready for the moment. It feels like no matter what the other team throws at them.
It's one of those things where even if this team goes down 2-0, you're still like, yeah, we still have the potential to win this game. And I've never, I think, felt while watching any of the games, maybe a couple where you could see that the team was a little bit off their game. But majority of the times it's like, okay, even if we go down, and we always tend to concede first, and we perform better when we concede first. So it just seems like this team's really resilient and depends on a reaction rather than being proactive. Are you even an Inter Miami fan if you don't have some heart issues? Because this team loves to give us some crazy moments that have our hearts in our mouth.
Well, I'll be fair. Every single MLS match day, I just check my Twitter account, and it's just people from Nashville and Charlotte and Toronto and New York and LA and St. Louis and Kansas City just complaining about their team and complaining about everything that goes wrong. And I think we have a little bit of a champagne problem where our team gives up goals early just so we can have exciting and fun comebacks, right? What a tragedy. What a travesty.
As long as we keep winning and getting those 3 points, I have no problem with that approach.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? They go down early and often, and they never crumble. They never freak out. They never panic. They are always ready to, make a comeback, or at least seemingly always ready. And as a fan, you have to feel that confidence that even though we go down 1, even if we go down 2, right? When you go down 2, you start thinking to yourself, okay, maybe we're not going to come back in this game. Maybe we don't have this. But still, right, I'm thinking about that Montreal game on the road. Go down 2, and it doesn't even take us till halftime before we can make a comeback. Good times, right?
Champagne problems indeed. I will say, though, there might be a time when this comes to bite us back. And I hope I eat my words in this, but you don't want to make a habit of it. But it does tend to show a sense of resiliency in this team, that they're able to have the mindset to be able to come back, and the strength of character to constantly come back and never give up, which I absolutely love.
In my head, it's not a problem, honestly. I know that you don't want to give up goals early, but
Yeah.
the fact that you always know that you can come back from it is so big, right? We played Columbus last week, and they give up an early goal, right? Ian Frey scores in the 10th minute, and Leo Campana scores in the 21st minute, I believe. And we go up 2-0, and all of a sudden it's like, is Columbus out of this game already? And yet they weren't really able to ever come back and make it a game. In fact, they scored a goal, but after that, they only created 1 or 2 really solid chances for the rest of the game. They didn't have that like killer comeback gene. We have seen it with FC Cincinnati, Columbus to an extent, I guess, but we're talking about the best teams in the league right now. And for Inter Miami to be there and to do it better than anyone else, and to have done it more frequently than anyone else, is certainly a good thing to have in the back of your mind, so that when we do go to those big games, the must wins, an early goal is not going to phase us.
And you talked about fearless, but you haven't even spoken of that game, or maybe I missed it. But Philadelphia, man, we were 9 men down, and we still won that game in the last minute. It was phenomenal. You didn't mention the late winner, but it's
pervasive throughout the team, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's not just when Lionel Messi's there and so okay, we have Messi, so we're fine. We can still do this. It is
Leo Afonso, man. This is his rookie season, and he has the confidence and the tenacity to take on a defender and score by himself. So that just goes to show that this is in the team throughout, from the front to the back. And those are the moments that you live for, right?
Can I ask you a question? Do you think that Leo Afonso can pull that off, and that Inter Miami has the guts and the resilience to pull that game out of Philadelphia if we don't go through all of those comebacks earlier in the season, if we don't get that win at DC United, if we don't get the comeback at Sporting Kansas City, rebounding after a poor first half against Colorado, like those moments, even when Messi is on the field, feels like it builds character throughout the team, so that now, even though Messi's not there, even though Suarez is not there, they still feel like we got this, we can do this, right? And that still kind of plays out, I think, for everyone.
Experience is the biggest teacher, right? So you got to go through the grind to be able to live through it as well. And you're absolutely right. If we don't have that character building moments, if we don't have those moments where we actually have to test ourselves, we're probably not going to deliver in times when it actually matters. So yeah, this team has learned to come back from difficult situations, and I absolutely love that for them.
Okay, something we don't know. Can this team avoid the lapses of concentration, the lapses of quality that affect them and have affected them this season, particularly at home? Right? I see some of our worst results of the season, and it feels like they've come mostly at home. Atlanta United lost 3-1, lost to Atlanta United, 3-3 draw against St. Louis City, 3-2 draw against CF Montreal, 1-1 draw at NYCFC. These were some really poor results, and it feels like they all came from just lack of concentration, lack of being in it for every single game, that consistently being where they need to be.
I don't think that goes away. As we said, like, there are certain things that are learned, experiences that you get over time. And it just seems like this team has that one mistake in them that's potentially going to cost them the game and make things difficult for themselves, whether it's Drake Callender against Monterrey, or David Ruiz giving that red card, or Toto Aviles making a rash tackle or a decision that goes against them. It just seems like there's always that one mistake, the one error that probably could cost us. The good thing is we have enough quality to overcome that and to be able to deal with those issues. But yeah, consistency is definitely an issue with this team, and I don't know how it gets fixed unless you actually sit down with the players over the next season and actually address that as a situation. I think while we're in the season, it might be hard to do away with or cut out, but at the end of the day, all that matters is that we're able to get the results despite these issues, and seems like Inter Miami has been able to.
Okay, let me ask this question again, because I'm
trying to fix my camera, so
you're fine. You're fine. It feels like Inter Miami has set themselves up to fail a couple times, and I mentioned a few games, and maybe it's a lack of focus. Maybe it's a lack of taking your opponent seriously, especially because it's been against a few lower level opponents. I honestly think a lot of those times is because we've been set up to fail with how we've put our game plan together, what the tactics have been in those games. Not necessarily that the players haven't come like ready to play, prepared to play, but it's that the whole organization, what they did in training, the tactic that they put together, the setup that they put together wasn't exactly what we needed for that game, and we weren't able to adjust on the fly and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense, I guess. I think Tata Martino doesn't help the team. I'm not sure if we're on the same page with this one, but Tata Martino doesn't help this team by putting them in situations that are problematic, right? So having Drake Callender and Toto Aviles play from behind, play from the back and build up from the back when it's definitely not their strongest suit against a really good opposition who will punish us. That is obviously setting the team up for failure, and that can lead to certain issues and times when we do have a lapse of concentration. But I will say there's another element to it where it also seems like there's a mental aspect where players do tend to have a lapse of judgment, I guess. And I refer to the stupid yellow cards or the red cards, and giving the ball away at a time when you probably should keep it more. Just the in-game management is what I am referring to. And I don't know if that's something that we'd be able to fix this season. But again, I guess it's just a difference of opinion. It hasn't really hurt us that much. I guess if it was hurting us game in, game out, then we would be talking about it a lot more. But I agree with your point that there are certain times during games or certain games where we're not set up to succeed at all. And that kind of exacerbates some of the issues that this team has and sort of sets us up for problems and issues during the game. And it's hard to react to that once you're in that moment. So yeah, I guess it's a duality there.
Well, I guess that's why we don't know it, because we haven't even been able to clearly identify the problem right now. Yeah, no, like you mentioned, there's been a number of dumb penalties. Toto Aviles against Vancouver, Cello Wiegand against the New York Red Bulls. Both Toto and David Ruiz getting sent off against Philadelphia that never really came back to bite us. Of course, David Ruiz getting sent off against Monterrey at home was really tough and definitely did bite us. But other than that, we've avoided those sort of really costly, stupid mistakes on the field. And so that's good. Okay, something we know. We have the best depth in the MLS, and honestly, I don't even think it's much of a question mark. We just went and beat the Columbus Crew 2-1, who are the defending MLS champions, very hot, have been incredible this season, were incredible last season, and we did it without 9 of our key players. No Messi, no Suarez, no Rojas, no Redondo, no Diego Gomez, no Nico Frede, no Cello Wiegand, no Toto Aviles, and no David Ruiz. And yet we still put out a very competent lineup. There was no one in that starting 11 that you felt didn't belong on the field. And we still had a few backups that could come in and make an impact. And so to have 20, 23, 24 real MLS caliber players is so unheard of. And to have the number of like high quality players that we have, it's just so incredible. this is the deepest team in the MLS, and I don't even think it's really that close.
We always knew about this fact. We always understood and spoke about it. We just never saw it in action. And I think having Messi and Suarez out has almost forced a situation where we need to see how much depth we actually have in some of our reserve positions. And it seems like everyone's up to the task. We can compete with the best on the best day. On the worst day, we can grind out a result against a Philadelphia Union 11-man team. It just seems like everyone is ready to contribute to this team, whether they're coming off the bench, whether they're actually starting the game. And yes, we have issues in terms of certain positions like right back. We don't have an out and out right back backup for Regan before Ian Frey came back. When this entire roster is healthy, this is the deepest this team, the MLS roster in the league. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And I would say our second tier team could potentially finish top 5 across the league. And that's a statement.
I don't know about top 5, but this is what our second 11 would be. You'd have a front 3 of Julian Gressel, Leo Campana, and Robert Taylor as a front 3. A midfield of, let's call it Kremaski, David Ruiz, and
Yannick
Bright. No, Yannick Bright.
I would say Yannick Bright. Yannick Bright, yeah.
That's a fine midfield. Young, but fine.
That's a solid midfield.
Yeah, and then a back line of Franco Negri, Sergei Christoph, probably Ryan Saylor, and Ian Frey, which is also a back line that you can get behind it, or is a real MLS back line. And then probably Dos Santos in goal is the weak link there, but having 2 goalkeepers is overkill.
I will say the only thing that team is missing is a creator, and then maybe Gressel can play that role. So I don't see a problem with that. That was very close to what we played against Columbus.
I don't know if that team's going to finish top 5 in the league, but I do think they could push for a playoff spot if they stayed healthy. And Inter Miami's had a ton of injuries this year, and there have been times where we've been missing 7-8 guys for like consistent periods of time. Other teams haven't had to deal with that, and if they have, they've fallen way down the table. Inter Miami has definitely been the most hard-hit team in terms of getting injured this year, and yet they are at the top of the table. They are consistently winning games. They've been great on the road. Even though they get a few suspensions, they've been able to overcome that. They've been able to have players leave for international duty and still be solid and still be fine and still get results against good teams. And then the midfield, man, you could probably put 3 MLS caliber midfields together with the guys that we have on this roster because it's really special. And, that lineup I just mentioned, you still have guys off the bench that are still quality players. Leo Alfonso, Lawson Sunderland, Ian, Noah Allen, all guys that are coming off the bench in that team and still making an impact. So Robbie Robinson, if he could get healthy.
Yeah, that's a deep team, man. And honestly, we haven't seen all our 30-man roster or 32-man roster, whatever it is. We haven't seen all of them fit at the same time. And we're not going to, because we've got Nico Freire out unless he gets removed from the roster. We're not going to see a fully healthy roster. And yet here we are talking about potentially putting up 2 really, really high caliber lineups. Absolutely fantastic being an Inter Miami fan. And no wonder some of the other fans from other teams are, they talk about how Inter Miami is able to afford some of these players, but we've got a really good young core that is actually really high level.
Yeah, and I think Tata Martino and Chris Henderson deserve a lot of credit for putting this roster together because they didn't miss on any of their signings, right? Maybe we can talk about Julian Gressel being inconsistent for what we paid for him, but all of the U22s have been impact players. Diego Gomez, Toto Aviles, they could have come in and been like Emerson Rodriguez and not have had huge impacts and been locked in starters, but they have. And that was great scouting by those guys. And then, of course, the academy deserves a lot of credit for giving us Ian Frey and Benjamin Karaski and David Ruiz and Noah Allen and some of the guys that have filled through the ranks. And then also, of course, you have to give credit to the superstars for being willing to take a discount in order to be on this team, right? Suarez did, Jordi Alba did, I'm sure Sergio Busquets did. And then some of the guys around them, Chelo Wiegand, Matias Rojas, they all took less money to be a part of this team with this core of players. But that allows you to have this phenomenal team. And so a lot of credit goes to a lot of people. And here's the crazy thing. There's a lot of flexibility moving forward for this team to improve even more if Tata and Chris Henderson can find the right players to make that happen, which leads to our next thing we don't know, which is exactly what we need to do this summer to complete this roster for the second half of the season. The window opens, I believe, July 18th. It closes August 14th. So we will have just under a month to make additions to the roster. That will be the first game they'll be eligible, will be the last game right before the Leagues Cup. That'll be against the Chicago Fire on July 20th. This team's not finished because we have room to make moves and we might as well make them. And we have some financial flexibility, so we might as well use it. This is a win now type of team, and we have to complete the roster. We don't have any international roster slots, but we could potentially get some. We have the potential to open up another DP spot. We do have some cash in our allocation budget, and we have a senior roster slot available. So what do we need to do to complete this roster? And I want to talk more generally and not specifically, at least to start, because I still think there's a little bit of a question mark of what exactly this team needs before we close off all our flexibility for the season.
Yeah, the way I think about it, we need one striker, one left wing, one right wing, one number 10, one midfielder. Now, I think in all seriousness, this team needs...
for a second.
In all seriousness, this team needs one quality centre back who could potentially play as right back as well. But with Ian Frey coming in,
yeah,
I don't think that's a requirement anymore. But I think we need one senior level centre back. This team needs one defensive midfielder and one left winger. These three positions for me should potentially be something that we're looking at. The rest of it, I think we're good.
So here's my point. I don't even agree with you on any of those three right now. I don't think that you want to bring in a left winger just to bring in a left winger when you have two starter quality left wingers. The only question is a matter of depth, but are you going to bring in a guy to be your fifth winger, your sixth winger, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if it's a player like, I don't even want to go into specifics. If it's a superstar, sure, bring him in, right? And there are big names out there that are connected in Miami. So if it's that type of player, go ahead and do it. But I don't think it's a need in terms of getting this team to an MLS Cup final or winning an MLS Cup this year, right? You can do that with Matthias Rojas and Robert Taylor and Julian Gressel being on the right and having some flexibility, and even a young guy like Leo Alfonso being a depth piece, right? It's there for you. Same thing in the midfield. I definitely don't think they're going to bring in a defensive midfielder. So I don't even know if, I don't think they think that they need a defensive midfielder. They have 7-8 quality midfielders on this team. And the idea of bringing in another one, he's not going to get playing time. Or you're going to have another player not getting playing time, right? You already have Busquets, Gressel, Redondo, Kramaski, Yannick Bright, David Ruiz, and Diego Gomez as guys that are definitely MLS starter caliber players. You're not going to bring in a six and just bench more of those. Tata Martino is already struggling to bring in, or already struggling to get the guys he wants playing time. And so, we talked about with the midfield balance. Center back, I think, is more obvious because we lost Nico Freda and you'd want to replace him. But with Ian Frey stepping up, can he be that option next to Toto Aviles and then just be a phenomenal partnership, and Christoph be your third center back and Ryan Saylor being your fourth center back? Like, you can see how that could work. And there's a lot of MLS teams around the league that would be happy with that center back setup.
So basically what you're saying is this team doesn't need any signings and we're good as we are.
No. Here's what I'm saying. We don't know exactly what this team needs yet. And so I think it's more than likely we're going to sign a center back. I think that's probably our number one priority. But if you tell me Ian Frey steps in over the next 3 games and is locked down at center back, and you're not sure you can get a player better than him, then maybe you do ride it out with him, right? Same thing on the left wing. If you can go get a player like again, I don't want to name names, but if you can go get a superstar there, but it costs you that one extra roster slot you have, and you have to sacrifice getting a center back in order to get that player, like I think you do it, right? Same thing at right back, same thing at whatever, right? I don't know if they're looking at another goalkeeper. I doubt it. But my point is, like, 5 games to go before the window, or 4 games to go before the window opens, and the whole Leagues Cup until the window closes. I still don't think this team knows exactly what it wants to do in the transfer window. Although I do think getting a center back is most likely.
Yeah, I mean, if you put it that way, that makes a whole lot of sense. But if you ask me, if I was Tata Martino, I'd definitely get a center back for sure, and then a defensive midfielder. Those two, I think, would be a really high priority for me, and then get rid of some of the extra central midfielders that we may have. And I feel like Diego Gomez might be heading out anyways, so that might free up a spot. And then I don't see how Lawson Sunderland has a position on this team, and this might be a good chance for him to move on to another MLS team where he might have more playing time. So if you think about it that way, there is potentially
moving Lawson Sunderland doesn't help because he's on the supplemental roster. So yes, if you move Diego Gomez, you open up a U22 spot. But do you want to use a U22 spot on a center back, or do you want to go get a 30-year-old center back that is, that veteran type player instead of a young, prospect, right? So how exactly you make this work, I still think is up for debate. And I do think Ian Frey is a big part of that conversation, because a month ago I would have said we need a center back that can also fill in at right back. And now turns out he might have been on the roster the whole time. So how does all of that play out together? I don't think it's entirely clear how it's going to work yet. And I don't know if it's entirely clear what Tata Martino and Chris Henderson are going to do about it. And I'm also not convinced that Diego Gomez is 100% going to leave this summer, just because things happen in the transfer
injury
market.
Doesn't help. Yeah.
And if you're a club and you want Diego Gomez, especially if you're at a club in like the Premier League, you want him as the last signing of this window, not your like marquee signing. And so sometimes the money just isn't there at the end of the window, and all of a sudden it doesn't happen. So I'm not 100% convinced he's going to leave, although I do think it's possible. Anyways, let's do a couple things we don't know, because I want to end on my favorite thing we know. So something we don't know: can Tata Martino be tactically flexible once Lionel Messi comes back into the roster? I think he's done a good job over the last 2 games, and I think he did a good job in Vancouver putting together a formation and tactical setup that allowed this team to get the result they wanted, and they got 3 points in all 3 of these games so far. But we've also seen him be a little stiff and strict when all of our best players on the field. And I do think when you have Messi and Suarez, you have to play different, because they don't provide defense from the front, but also they provide so much offense that you can rely on it. It allows you to change your game plan up. Can Tata Martino consistently put out the right formation and lineup even once those guys come back?
There are a couple of things that I think we need to give Tata credit for, which is really hard to do, and he's done fantastically well. One is managing all the superstars in this team, and it really helps that all of them are friends and there doesn't seem to be too much of an ego. But it's not always the case that you have players of Messi caliber or Luis Suarez, and it doesn't always fit the bill, and sometimes if Luis Suarez is not playing well, then you're tempted to bench him, because you have Leo Campana, who tends to stake a claim for that starting position. So a lot of things could have gone much worse, and I think the way Tata's managed that and managed the team and allowed some of our superstars to really lead the way has helped the cause a lot. And then secondly, his ability to be tactically flexible when Messi is not there and when we're missing some of our superstars. I really doubted that. I was definitely looking out for it in this next stretch of games. But over the course of 2-3 games, he's already shown that he's more than capable of adapting when the going gets tough. And when he needs to actually set up the team for success, he's able to do that. Now, coming back to your question of whether he can do that with Lionel Messi in the team, I think when you have those 4 superstar players with Sergio Busquets, Lionel Messi, and Luis Suarez, and Jordi Alba, the team sort of starts to pick itself out, and there's not much flexibility in who you pick in terms of the starting 11 maybe the midfield is one area when you can, plug and play a little bit. So that sort of does away with his flexibility to pick the starting 11. But what he hasn't demonstrated yet is if he can use those 4 players in a more tactically flexible system. And I'm not sure if you can even do that. But yeah, that is a big question mark. And it'll be interesting to see, because I do think in the playoffs, a lot of these players are going to be available. So it's going to be interesting to see how Tata actually molds this team in a manner that gets the best out of everyone. Because sometimes I think we rely a lot on the talent of our front 5, and then defensively we're left a little bit wanting. And it hasn't been like a perfect 9 or 100% across the field. It's always been one side's doing really well, and then the midfield's not doing that well, and then the defense is doing well, but the forwards aren't doing too well. So we need a consistently solid performance, and that's up to Tata to bring that out.
Yeah, and we've mentioned it a couple times, but I think getting the midfield right consistently is going to be the biggest key to that. Games are won and lost in the midfield, and when we don't get the midfield right, we've seen that this team is capable of surrendering a lot of goals to mediocre competition, right? It happened against Atlanta, happened against St. Louis, happened a couple times earlier this season. Do you think the lessons that we learn about this team over the next couple games, right, when the Copa America is going on, do you think Tata Martino is going to be able to take those lessons and apply them moving forward? Or do you think it's sort of like, okay, we had to do this while those guys were gone, but now that they're back, we can go back to our original game plan?
Unfortunately, we're learning the lessons while our main key players are away. So it doesn't really help, because the lessons might be completely different when they're in the team. So I would say the latter, because right now the focus is to get the results rather than actually, think about a consistently good performance.
Yeah, you cut out there for a second, but I think we got what you were going with. Okay, we have a little bit of a condensed schedule tonight, so we're going to make this a little bit shorter of an episode, and we're going to go to our final thing that we know about this team that we've seen, and I think both of us feel comfortable making this statement after half of 2024 about what's going to happen in the second half of 2024. And that is that this Inter Miami 2024 roster, even as it is, even without adding superstars in the summer, is capable of winning the MLS Cup come November, December. And I feel confident in that statement.
Yeah, and obviously we're not saying that they will win it, but on paper, this team can and should win the MLS Cup and maybe even the Leagues Cup. We have the depth, we have the quality, and I think the last few games have really shown how far this team has come from the first game against Real Salt Lake, where a lot of the question marks about our reliance on our superstar players has been answered. And I know it's not nearly perfect, but the capability is there. If we make the right decisions in terms of the teams that we pick, in terms of the personnel, this roster, with the way it's been constructed, is more than capable of beating anyone on their day, and we can go toe-to-toe with the best. So I don't see a reason why Inter Miami cannot win the MLS Cup and cannot win it all.
Yeah, they've proven that they can beat the best teams and they can hang with the best teams, right? They beat Real Salt Lake. They went to the LA Galaxy and got a draw. They've beaten Nashville. They've beaten Columbus. They're going to get a chance against Cincinnati here in the next couple of weeks. We watched them beat LAFC last year, so they should have that confidence when it comes to playing the LA teams. There's no one in this league that they can't beat, especially on their day, and especially if Tata Martino sets them up to defend and attack effectively, and all of that starts in the midfield. And so I personally think the only thing holding them back is Tata Martino. And every game we have where we do what we've done over the last 2 games, it gives me more confidence that he's going to set the team up in the right way to get the results that we want.
Yeah, somehow it always comes back to the midfield combination. And hopefully, you know what? I'd rather peak at the right time. So maybe we're still testing the waters and seeing how things work out. And eventually we're going to get the perfect combination for the playoff run. Can't wait for that, man, because I feel this team is going to be very, very dangerous and so spicy once they actually get the pieces together and everyone can start playing together. we'll see how it goes. We'll come back to this conversation sooner rather than later, and we'll know how it's progressed. But so far, it's all very positive signs.
Okay, we've gone for about an hour. We talked about 5 things that we know about this team, 5 things that we still aren't sure about. Anything you want to say before we wrap this episode up? It's a little bit of a shorter episode, but we had a hard out tonight, and so we wanted to get this out before that happened. So anything else from you?
I will say that there probably are a couple of other things that we don't know. One being what's Julian Gressel's best position in this team and where to get the most out of him. But other than that, it's good to take a stock of our season halfway through or almost halfway through. And I'm just glad that the games are going to resume soon because I miss watching Inter Miami play. And we have a couple of good games coming up. So hopefully the boys can rise up to the occasion as always.
I always like to check Twitter right before we end just to see if anything's happening. The Canada-Peru Copa America game is on right now, and our old friend Kamal Miller has entered the game and is playing for Canada. So hopefully he has a good performance. If you guys need more Inter Miami content, I always will recommend you checking out The Heartbeat, our sibling podcast that runs daily. It's just a 20-minute daily type thing, just a little fun thing for the mornings. But other than that, it was a lot of fun as always. And I appreciate you guys as always. We'll be back for our pregame show 1 hour before kickoff on Saturday. We'll talk about Nashville in depth, what the lineup looks like, what Nashville looks like, how we can win that game. That is only on YouTube. So if you're listening to this from one of your podcast apps, I recommend checking that out. It's the hour before kickoff, and it's a fun way to get out the nerves right before the game starts. So I encourage you to check that out. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And the U.S. needs to get 3 points on Thursday. Everyone, have a great night, and we'll see you next time.